Dr. Sindhu R. Pandit Memorial Keynote Address. This particular keynote address was instituted from the year 2006 onwards in every AMOGS annual conference by Professor R.D. Pandit, who was the founder of AMOGS, in the memory of his late wife, late Sindhu R. Pandit. Brief biodata of Pandit Madam. She was an alumna of the prestigious GS Medical College, Mumbai. She did her appointments, resident appointments in Kama and All Bless Hospital at Mumbai. She also worked as an honorary associate professor at the SSG Hospital and Medical College, Baroda from 1954 to 1963. Yeah. And to deliver this particular keynote address, we have with us none other than Rishikesh Pai. Yeah. Great. Yeah.
What's that?
Rishikesh.
Introduce Karu.
Okay.
It gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Rishikesh Pai. He's a past president of MOGS, IAG, ISAR, and it's got more than 10 IVF centers all over India, and Bloom IVF Center, and honorary at Lilavati Hospital, and professor at various universities nationally and internationally, and Dr. D.Y. Patil. And besides this, he's a very nice human being and a very good friend. Dr. Rishikesh Pai.
Thank you. I would like to first of all thank the AMOGS, the leadership, for inviting me for this prestigious Dr. Pandit oration. I actually personally knew Madam. I have visited their house many times. Dr. R.D. Pandit was like a father figure of the Federation. He was always there for us to guide us. And you know, I knew him. I was a student in Wadia Hospital also. And Madam was very nice person, you know, always smiling. And I think she was a backbone, and she was equally responsible for Sir's success. So it's a privilege and pleasure to give this oration. And of course, I'd like to request you that I'm standing this year for the FOXI presidentship, which will be held for 2022. I've been in Federation since 1984 and done everything possible. And this is the last part of my career as far as the FOXI is concerned. And I hope that you will help me in achieving this aim. You know, before I had 2 talks to be given, and I was thinking to myself that, you know, which talk I should give first, whether the PCOS talk, which is my own personal talk, or should I give the Manyata talk? And I decided no, the most important thing for me is the Federation. The FOXI is more important than personal self. And so I have decided to give you the Manyata talk first, because this is very important for us. So if you look at Manyata, it started, hello, Nikhil, I need the big screen. Can you do this? I can't read otherwise. I'm too old for that. So if you look at it, it was conceived by Hema Divakar. She is my actual classmate from KM Hospital. And Pompi Sridhar, who is the director of the MSD for Mothers in India. MSD has got a $500 million fund, which is being used for all over the world for mothers and children. And they funded this program. And when Rishma Pai, my wife, who was the president of Federation in 2017, Hema approached Rishma and me. I was the Secretary General then, and she said, I have this program and I've got this, can we do this project? And we launched that project in 2017. In 2018, and then at that point of time, we needed a funder. And the MacArthur Foundation is a huge foundation in the United States. And Dr. Deepa Nagde was the person. She said, of course, I'll fund it for you. And till 2019, she said, after 2019, you have to be independent. We can't keep on funding you all the time. Once we started implementing it, we had to form a NPMU. That is the implementation unit. And that's where Dr. Amaya Purandare came in. He looked after the NPMU along with Dr. Samita Bharajwaj, Jasmine Kunder, and there are other few people in the unit. And we created this unit and housed it within the Federation. And at that point, we had to also have someone to help us to implement it in the general public. And that's where Dr. Bulbul Sood of Japaigo, John Hopkins Center is a big center in the United States, which works in developing countries. They came in. And That was started. Then it had to be sustained. And the sustenance took place because next year I finished my Secretary General's post. Dr. Jaideep Tang came in, and Jaideep was excellent Secretary General. Dr. Jaideep Malhotra came in. Dr. Patel, Dr. Suvarna Khadelkar, Parikshit Tang were there, and they had to sustain it, because whatever idea you create, if there is no sustenance, it will flop. So sustenance took place in 2018, and in 2019, Nandita came in as the POXI president, and at that point in time, innovation was brought in. So sustenance started occurring, we started developing, we got 300 centers enrolled with us, and then came the innovation, and she, along with Dr. Archana Patel, Dr. Sanjay Gupte, Dr. Rohini Deshpande of AMOX, the then president, Dr. Mandakini, my friend, who always works with the government, and Dr. Shrotri, all of them, Suchita Kanjanwar, all of them, they said, why not do a Lakshya program? At that point, Lakshya program was going on in the government hospitals. So they said, why can't we join the two? And that's how the Lakshya Manyata program was launched. And now in front of us is Dr. Alpesh Gandhi, who is sitting, and Dr. Alpesh Gandhi in his opening speech said, now I want to take it all over the country, and we look up to him that the next step. So every president of federation that comes in will innovate, and what was launched in AMOX, that will be continued by hopefully by Dr. Alpesh Gandhi and the team. And so as you can see, we launched it in 2017. And so what is Manyata? It is a quality assurance and control program. And you have two parts to it, quality assurance and quality improvement. So we come to you, we certify you, we then give you the certificate, and we keep on inspecting you to see that you don't fall down in your quality improvement. So if you look at Lakshya Manyata, so Lakshya program, so when we conceived the Manyata program, there were 16 standards. You will say, Hawa se nikala kya? No, the WHO had recommended these 16 clinical standards, and those standards were incorporated in the Manyata program. But the Lakshya program of the government, which was for the teaching hospitals, had got what is known as facility standards. There were 10 facility standards. So our program was more focused on the clinical standards. He said, okay, let's join the facility standard, but we had to reduce the facility. If we actually apply the facility standards of the real Lakshya program, you can't get your nursing home recognized. So Dr. Sanjay Gupte and all of them, they sat down and they trimmed down the facility standards so that a small nursing home can also get those facility standards passed. And that's how the Lakshya Manyata program has been evolved. So if you look at the geographic map, we launched it in the 5 states of Maharashtra, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Jharkhand, and Karnataka. Now, the next expansion will be in the other states as well. Already 800 facilities have been already certified. And this is the breakup. Maharashtra, of course, has very high certification of 123 ongoing facilities, 244. We are always leaders. We are always innovators. We always are path breakers in Maharashtra, and that's how we have proved in the Manyata program as well. And these are the enrolled. And if you look at Amravati, even in Amravati, we have got 8 centers that are already enrolled. So what are the components? So now let us look at our state. What will be in our state? It will be Lakshya Manyata. In the other states, it's Manyata, but with Dr. Alpesh's effort, let us hope that it becomes Lakshya Manyata in all other states as well. So what are the 4 components? One is the clinical standard. So there are 16 clinical standards. Then the facility standards. There are 10 facility standards. Then support facilities. We need to train you. We need to do on-site monitoring. We need to provide you with documentation. And you need to adhere to evidence-based practices. And then the certification is there. So we give them certificate. It's a 2-year certificate, and you have to keep on reapplying after it. So these are the clinical standards. I'll not go through it. Just to give you a general idea, there are 16 of them, which are all about delivery, this, that. I don't have to go through it. And these are the facility standards, especially if you look at the 10 facilities, scope of service, infrastructure, patient information, equipment and instruments, medicines and supply management, nursing care, medical record, training and health of staff, quality management, and care of patients in operation. So all these standards, once you have that, your hospital will become beautiful, fantastic functioning. It really changes and improves your style, your functioning. You will get better feedback from the patients, and more patients are going to walk into your facility. So these are the skill transfer workshops which are also conducted, where you have participatory training, role plays, we have targets managers, knowledge updates, and now we have got Zoom. We have got a new platform called the Zoom platform. So we train through the internet network, and more people are brought in onto the Zoom platform for training. So these are the 5 things. We first go for provider orientation, provider engagement. We engage the provider, that is a nursing home. Baseline assessment, they'll come and assess your nursing home. Then offsite training, we'll take you to one training center like Dr. Gupte's center is there in Pune. Then on-site monitoring, will come to your center and they'll monitor what's happening and they'll try to improve your center. And then of course we'll have the final assessor. They'll come, the assessors will come and examine you and see, and they'll give you marks. So how do you do it? Suppose you are sitting in the audience and you want to do it, we will first contact us. So these are the contact numbers, email ID. You can even contact the Foxy office. Once you are contacted, what are the charges? 20,000 rupees is for one maternity home, and for corporates it is 30,000. But it's really subsidized. I don't agree with subsidy. You know, actual spending per center is 80,000 rupees. So we are subsidizing you for 60,000 rupees. It's really bad. And so there's a thought that maybe the A cities, they should spend more money, and maybe the C cities, the smaller societies, should spend less money. Maybe we can keep 20,000 for smaller societies, but for the larger societies, we must charge more. So this is how it goes. You engage the facility, do intervention and assessment. Then we'll do Foxy and Government of Maharashtra assessment. We'll score you. And if your scoring is good, you will get the certificate. If your scoring is not good, we'll recommend you improvements. You institute those improvements and will come again for analysis and then give you the certificate ultimately. So this is the certificate which we give you. And this is the leadership. Presently, as you can see, we are a hierarchical organization. Our Foxy president, the present president, always is the leader of the team. And then we have the administrative group. And we also are a sustainable organization. The past presidents of the federation are all kept on the panel because we want sustenance, we want leadership. And this is very important in doing federation activities. So this is how you get the certificate and what are the benefits of this certificate. I think I missed one slide on the benefits. There is a slide of benefits which I think I missed out. But there's a lot of benefits that are there which will come in the future. And you know, we are trying to tie up with insurance companies and all. And ultimately, let me tell you, if you don't have the Manyata certificate, I mean, you'll be left out. So you need to all, not because of anything else, you need to do your own internal improvement and give better facilities to your patients. So I think that all of you should rapidly, Maharashtra should cross 2,000 centers. Rapid certification process should be there in Maharashtra. So now coming to the talk of that today, that's the PCOS, which is an Indian perspective. So if you look at the PCOS, there are 3 pillars of PCOS. One is the hyperandrogenism. One is the menstrual irregularity, and the third is the polycystic ovarian pattern on ultrasound. These 3 parameters in combination you use for diagnosing a PCOS patient. And there are different 3 organizations that define PCOS, the NIHCD in 1990, the Rotterdam in 2003, and the AE-PCOS. There was a new society that was formed that was called the AE-PCOS Society in 2009. And there was a lot of confusion. And there were certain exclusion criteria because you have to exclude other androgen excess disorders. You have to exclude adrenal disorders like Cushing syndrome, androgen secreting tumors, and other allied pathologies. There were a lot of tests which you can do for diagnosing PCOS. LH by FSH ratio is commonly done. Progesterone on day 21, BMI, prolactin, T3, T4, TSH, and there is a lot of, because a lot of PCOS is associated with carbohydrate metabolism dysfunction, so a lot of serum insulin fasting, etc. can be done. And we can also do, especially the most important test you should do is the 17-OHP, because adrenal source can also manifest or mimic as a PCOS patient, and you need to rule out that adrenal source. You need to rule out a tumor. Of course, it's a one, rarely. Majority of people will have nothing of that sort, but it's very important to keep that in mind. So what happened is that in 2018, the world was saying that there are too many controversies. So they decided to come under one organization, and that This paper has been published by Dr. Helena Tidd in Fertility Salinity in 2018. And this was, you must look at it, how it was structured. Governance included a 6-continent international advisory body and a project board, 5 guideline development groups and consumer and translational committees. 37 societies and organizations covering 71 countries participated in this activity. 20 face-to-face meetings over 15 months addressing 60 prioritized clinical questions involving 40 systematic and 20 narrative reviews was done. Evidence-based recommendations were developed and approved by, there was a voting for every evidence-based recommendation within the 5 guideline panels, modified based on international feedback and peer review, with final recommendations approved across all boards. So much effort was put in and a beautiful document was produced because they wanted, from now on, the document has to be added. If you want to present a paper, report anything, you have to use the document classification. Otherwise, they will not accept your paper for scientific research. So what were the guidelines? The guideline number 1 was the endorsement of the Rotterdam PCOS diagnostic criteria. So the definition of PCOS will be used was the Rotterdam criteria definition, where both oligoanovulation and hyperandrogenism are present. If patients have oligoanovulation and hyperandrogenism, I told you there are 3 parameters you have to use. Ultrasound is not necessary for diagnosis, especially in adolescent, because in adolescent, if you put an ultrasound on the adolescent abdomen, she'll get panicky because mentally she'll get depressed. So in adolescents, if oligoanovulation and hyperandrogenism are there, ultrasound is not recommended because it will cause trauma, mental trauma to the adolescent. Ultrasound criteria are refined. So as you advance, such a larger machine you get, you will have more follicles you will see on the machine. So as the technology advances, ultrasound criteria should be refined, and anti-mullerian hormone levels are not yet adequate for diagnosis of PCOS. So I use it in practice, but you don't have to use it. Insulin resistance is recognized as a key feature, but yet it is not recommended. So, you know, if you want to do research on PCOS, you may do insulin levels, but in practice, you don't need to do insulin levels for treating. So if you look at PCOS, there are different things that manifest. As I told you, the 3 main parameters are hyperandrogenism, hormonal imbalance, metabolic syndrome is there, insulin resistance is there, and very important component which you should not forget is the psychological problem. Now we are slowly evolving, we are slowly touching the Western standards. More and more litigation will come in because psychology, if you don't touch the psychology, you are going to land with litigation. Oh, doctor didn't take care of us, he was very rude. You know, I was talking to many of our people who are working in England. Majority of that time is spent in answering for complaints. If there's a complaint by the patient, you will. And if in your new clinical establishment now, there's a complaint box. If there's a complaint, you will have to have a resolution immediately on that day and set up the answer. You can't just neglect the patient. So all these things are coming in, and psychology is going to be a big problem for all of us in the future. So if you look at our Indian data, if you compare to Caucasians, where the incidence of PCOS is 6.5%, in Indians, the incidence is between 9 to 36%. And this data has come from Palomba et al. In as recent as 2018. If you look at the ovarian morphology also, the PCOS pattern typically is seen more with Indians than with Caucasians. So this data of morphology classification also is more with Indians. If you look at hirsutism on the other hand, it is more with Caucasians than with Indians. So there's a reverse. This is the data from Wolf et al. In 2018 that has come in. And if you look at insulin resistance, obviously we are the diabetic capital of the world, so we have got higher incidence, the 76% prevalence of insulin resistance compared to 67. It's really high. If you look at the PCOS phenotype genotype, this is a superb paper by Casserini in 2014, and what he has shown is that the Central Asian, that we come under Central Asian group, have severe metabolic phenotype, insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, and type 2 diabetes and hypertension is very prevalent. If you look at the color, the blue color, which is a severe metabolic syndrome. And these are the 4 phenotypes. So if there's an exam question, if they ask you what is ABCD phenotype in PCOS, the A is a typical one, that is the oligoanovulation, hirsutism, and the polycystic appearance on ultrasound, and in our country, nearly 55% are A phenotype. So how does PCOS cause infertility? One is because of poor oocyte quality, poor endometrial receptivity, hyperinsulinemia, and it can also cause gestational diabetes and hypertension during pregnancy. So the next guideline I would like to come to you is that once diagnosed, assessment and management includes reproductive, metabolic, and don't forget psychological features. Education, self-empowerment, multidisciplinary care, and lifestyle intervention for prevention or management of excess weight is important. Weight is a big priority, and depression and anxiety symptoms should be screened. You know, fat girl, they are very depressed, they are very anxious, so you have to manage them, and it is very important to improve their emotional well-being. If you look at obesity, at least 50% of women with PCOS are obese. Even a small reduction in weight, 2 to 5%, can result in significant improvement in metabolic and reproductive function. It can cause spontaneous ovulation. Many people, they do weight loss and they become pregnant on their own. So, what are the side effects of obesity? It aggravates PCOS, causes anovulation. It has poor obstetric outcome, increased incidence of miscarriages there. Preterm birth is very high. PIH, diabetes, thromboembolic phenomena, and post-caesarean wound infection. They are obese. Naturally, there's a higher incidence of wound infection in these patients. And if you look at even IVF, the more difficult. You have to give more gonadotropin. Consumption is huge. Normally, if you give for a thin PCOS 150, you will have to give 375 daily gonadotropin for a fat PCOS. Lower rate of oocyte recovery, greater you give them, they don't respond. Suddenly, pat karke they'll respond, and cause once I had a patient, we got 70x. It was out of control response. I mean, I didn't sleep on that night because I was worried what will happen to the patient. But lower pregnancy rates and live birth rates, and so access-wise, technically also difficult to access. Anesthesia risk is huge. So in our Lilavati, if there's a very obese BMI more than 100, the pickup is done in the main OT with all the anesthesia and all. Because I always tell people, you can't lose a single patient. So they are all healthy young patients. If you lose a patient, you are finished in your practice. So what are the lifestyle modifications are very important. Everyone needs lifestyle modification. If benefits of fertility, metabolic abnormalities are corrected, long-term effects are positive, and more than that, the bariatric surgery. So what is the role of bariatric? If the BMI is more than 40 or BMI is more than 35 with coexisting medical problem, you should advise bariatric. They normally lose 20 to 40 kilos over 2 years' time, and you must always maintain the weight loss for 10 years, and pregnancy is not recommended in the first year after surgery. And very important, personally I've seen a lot of people, they have depression, alcoholism, and suicide. Many people die also. So there's, many of these surgeries that you do, we don't know what are the long-term follow-up. They don't have any long-term follow-up. They'll just cut the stomach and send them home. Then what happened to the patient is like aspirin. My mother once, after cardiac surgery, massive bleed she had. I had to give 27 bottles. So long-term follow-up, post-surgery, whether aspirin has its complication, no one has any atta-pata about all these things. The third guideline of PCOS is combined OC pill are first-line pharmacological management for menstrual irregularity and hyperandrogenism with no specific formulation. So if you have a patient, she has PCOS, she comes to you, she doesn't want to have a child, you can give her a standard OC. It doesn't matter what OC you give, and you can give low dose, any OC you can give. And metformin is recommended in addition or alone primarily for management of metabolic syndrome. So there are a lot of insulin sensitizers that are available, metformin. You have the inositols, D-chiroinositol, myoinositol, and you have the combinations that are there, myoinositol with D-chiro, myoinositol with metformin. Any one of them you can use. So what are the indications of sensitizers? Patient with glucose intolerance and insulin resistance, obese patients with BMI more than 35, clomiphene resistant women. You try to, when we are doing IVF, we always give metformin. It reduces the incidence of hyperstimulation, and alone it is less effective. So if you are doing induction, if you combine it with metformin, you will have a better induction, and decrease in miscarriage rate is also there. So you continue metformin in the first trimester of pregnancy, it will reduce your miscarriage rate as well. So if you come to ovulation induction, aim is to go for single follicle. Multiple births is a problem. I have seen so many multiple births. They may survive 500 grams, they'll survive, but their quality of life is horrible. Retinal detachment, deafness is there, blindness is there, palsies are there. It's not worth it. We ultimately will have to go towards single births in our practice. So what are the tests prior to induction? I've already gone through it. Mainly AMH should be done and antral follicle count. Once that is done, we classify the response. There's normal, hyper and poor responder, and then we do normally ovulation induction with IUI. The next guideline is letrozole is the first line pharmacological therapy. Clomiphene and metformin both having a role. So, there are a lot of studies that have shown that letrozole is better in PCOS patients, and this is a meta-analysis that has shown improved pregnancy rates. And there's always been a worry about malformation. So, three meta-analyses have come in, which have shown that there's no difference in the malformation rate. So the next guideline is in women with PCOS and anovulatory infertility, gonadotropins are the second line. Once you have gonadotropins, you can use a combination is better, CC with FSH or letrozole with FSH. And this is the Dr. B.N. Chakravarti's protocol. Recently I was called and to give a talk in Calcutta, and Dr. B.N.C. was talking before me. He was 91 years old. I was thinking I am 60, was 6 ko ulta karenge to 90 ho jayega. So he came on the stage and he talked and he gave this wonderful protocol. So he gives CC day 2 to day 6, and he just gives one shot of FSH on day 3. And then he does monitoring. When the follicle is ready, he does induction. He said if they don't respond, then another shot you give on day 8. And that's it. And that protocol has given him fantastic results in PCOS. So then, of course, you can do a pure gonadotropin step-up protocol, but we normally in our practice don't do this. And sometimes you can go for laparoscopic drilling. The next guideline is in the absence of absolute indication for IVF, women with PCOS and anovulatory infertility could be offered IVF as a third line. So the third line treatment is IVF, and it's standard treatment. What we have to take care of is that we should do weight loss for these women. We should give them metformin. Sometimes in a resistant person, you may do drilling, and all the measures will increase the IVF outcome. And the important thing is that segmentation. So what we do is always stimulate the patient, take the eggs out, freeze the embryos, and then transfer in the next cycle. This is called segmentation. And there's one point, Dr. Pai's point in this is that some of the PCOS have a small uterus. So after you freeze the embryos, I look at the size of the uterus. If the uterus is so small, I'll give them hormones for 2-3 months, increase the size of the uterus, and then do the transfer. And prior to transfer, I always do DNC hysteroscopy, because there are a lot of polyps which you miss out on plain DNC, and the endometrium is hyperplastic. You must remove the endometrium. And I tell you that in 3 attempts, 90% of them become pregnant. Miscarriage rate is very high in PCOS, and there are a lot of causes. I'll not go through it. And there are 2 studies which have shown that metformin can decrease that miscarriage rate. And there's always the fear that congenital malformation following metformin. So there's this new study of Givens that has come of 88 lakh births, where he has not shown any increase in the miscarriage rate. So this is the last algorithm slide, which is there. If there is a PCOS patient, you will do ovulation induction. If you'll see for ovulation, if the ovulation is there, you wait for 9 months for pregnancy. If there is no ovulation, you do induction with clomiphene. First, you will do lifestyle modification, bariatric surgery. Again, if that doesn't cause ovulation, then you'll go for clomiphene, letrozole. If doesn't cause ovulation, go for gonadotropin. And if doesn't cause ovulation, go for IVF. This is the H3 recommendation algorithm. So if you look at, in conclusion, lifestyle and weight reduction are very important. Low dose OC for people. I forgot one slide, and that is many of them are hirsutism. So you should use laser for removing if you use other things for the new hair, laser will destroy the roots of the hair. So for the pre-existing hair, laser should be used, and for the new hair, to prevent them, you can use other preparations like aldactone, etc. So low dose OC, then you overcome the hyperstimulation, insulin resistance with metformin, or you can give a combination. You classify the patient based on antral follicle count and AMH. You give them letrozole, clomiphene, or a combination with gonadotropin. If that fails, you can go for a low dose gonadotropin protocol. IVF with antagonist cycle, and GnRH trigger is very important. Segmentation, so you freeze the embryos, then you look for the uterus size. If it is small, you give E+3 for 3-4 months, increase the size. After that, prior to the transfer, you do a DNC hysteroscopy, scrape out the pathological endometrium, then only you will get a good pregnancy. Don't only focus on the embryo. The uterus is equally important, and very rarely, in 10% of these people, you need to go for egg donation. Thank you for a patient hearing.